1460 WVOX.
Stay tuned now for Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome, everybody, to Westchester Eye on the Radio. I'm Peter Moses with John Sharan and Ardina Seward. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well. Waiting for our guests to call in. Don't know what's going on here.
I like the nice warm-up we had over the weekend. Was able to do some nice yard work yesterday, and I'm still enjoying fine Thanksgiving leftovers. And there are a few things as good as Thanksgiving leftovers.
Well, it's been a tough week in the Moses home. My mother-in-law died
I'm sorry
a little over a week ago. You didn't know that?
I did not know. I'm sorry.
And so at my house, there was the long mourning period in Judaism, and my wife took advantage of the whole week to do that. Anyway, we're supposed to have a guest on who as yet has not called in. Right, Ardina?
Yep, we're waiting on George Latimer because he had a lot of stuff to talk about. But we're going to talk about homelessness, we're going to talk about the county budget, and we're going to talk about some questions.
Don't let the cat out of the bag.
Don't let the cat. And we're going to talk about a questionable neighbor.
Ah, that's much better. Much better tease.
Right, in an upscale Westchester neighborhood.
What does that mean?
Well, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag.
I want to know what you're talking about.
Oh, we hear the phone ringing. We hear the phone ringing.
Is that like Saved by the Bell?
And
That's not him.
And it's not George Latimer.
George, where are you? What happened? You promised to be on the show.
He's usually pretty reliable about this.
He is, and you know, Peter and Ardina, you know, I do the military show right beforehand. One of the things that I've always been impressed with George is that whenever it comes to solemn events and solemn commemorations, especially involving our military, George, even before he was county executive, always made sure he attended those things. So clearly it means things to him. And George is a pretty reliable guy that way. And so I hopefully his schedule didn't get jammed up and won't prevent him from calling in. But I've been impressed with George for quite some time.
Have you guys, in the meantime, we have to find some things to talk about. So first thing I want to talk about is the election tomorrow in Mississippi. Have you guys been keeping up on it?
A little bit.
Ardina, have you?
Yeah, it's problematic because you've got a candidate who made reference to a hanging, and
no, more than made reference to a hanging, said that if this individual she was standing next to was invited her to one, she would attend. That
not
is
just attend, she would sit
in the front row. That's correct, and that's about it.
She also attended. Her parents were such racists that they had her attend a public school system that was for whites only. This is after the desegregation act.
Now, my understanding was it wasn't a public school. I thought it was a private school, and I thought that
it was a private school created. You're right.
Yes.
It was a private school created so that white kids didn't have to integrate and go to school with African American children.
And if that's the case, I think you're absolutely right. But you know, as somebody who went to Iona Prep, which is a decidedly white school, I can tell you I was sent there because of its educational qualities. So I don't honestly know whether this individual was sent there because of the education.
Does this woman sound highly educated to anyone in this room?
I know some people who've graduated from Iona Prep who don't sound very educated.
I know people who graduated from Harvard. I've read of Ivy League educated people who turned into murderers.
I think she has created many problems for herself and certain things, and
that's the best you got?
No, it's not the best I've got.
Oh, okay.
The bottom line is that I think that she's made some serious problems out there. The question then becomes, you know, which is the candidate that represents everything or most of the things that you want to get, and that's why this is still going to be a competitive race down there because SB, the opposition, stands for positions that some people don't support, and especially in Mississippi haven't supported for quite some time, and so there's going to be it's going to be a close race. It really is.
I have a feeling she's going to win.
Yeah, well, she's a product of her times. You know, she's an older woman who grew up in the segregated South, and celebrates it. And celebrates it, and she's appealing to her base. SP is, I don't want to say he's a novice. He's a name that has, that does have a track record. But, the whole, one of the most interesting things about Southern politics is how entrenched it is. And it's beyond politics. It is a culture. It is a philosophy. And it is really difficult to disembed that. I don't know if that's, John, forgive my English, disembed.
I don't think that's a word.
The word doesn't exist.
I don't think that word exists.
To escape from.
To escape from. But and I think, Peter, you're right. I think that she does have a good chance of winning. I mean, she's been in the game long enough.
And the chief wingnut's going down today to campaign for her twice.
Well, there you go. There you go. So is that a guarantee that she's going to win? Perhaps not.
Well, he is going down there, and according to what I've read, he's going to say this is not a referendum on her.
It's a referendum
referendum on me.
Bada bing, bada bang. Stick a fork in it.
Bada
she
bing,
wins.
bada boom.
Bada bing, bing, bada boom. Well, if
you're going to quote the Sopranos or Mafia talk or Italian American talk, get it right.
But I have heard bada bing.
Peter comes back and he's in fine fettle, isn't he?
I have heard bada bing, bada bang. There are
other people getting it wrong.
There are variations of it. I mean, it's a
I think there's a right way and a wrong way, and sometimes the wrong way proliferates. My father would go to Italian restaurants and order zuppa de piece.
Zuppa de pesce.
But he would call it zuppa de piece. No matter how many times I corrected him, it was zuppa de piece. I said, Dad, that's not how it's pronounced. That's how I pronounce it. But Dad, it's wrong. It's not the correct. There is no such food as zuppa de piece.
Well,
but he insisted that the restaurants never got it, never wondered what he was ordering. I said, no, you're just embarrassing your family. And I guess that was okay with him. And Trump can embarrass the family of Americans, and so can this crazy woman. And we're going to go to break now. When we come back, we're going to have more scintillating conversation because I don't know if George Latimer's calling in. We'll be right back.
And now let's return now to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back to Westchester Eye on the Radio. I'm Peter Moses with my co-host John Sharan and someone who's going to dog on George Latimer right now, according to her, Ardina Seward. Ardina, dog away. Those are your words, my dear.
I feel like I've been outed. I've been told.
Oh!
Well, the thing is, I just spoke with George Latimer's press agent, and apparently he's
at a press conference.
He's at a press conference right now, which he cannot.
It's all about you, though. He's professing his undying affection for the skills that you show as a longtime videographer and radio host. He's praising you to the sky right now.
I doubt it.
But you don't know.
I sincerely doubt. But the whole point is that we're trying to patch a hole here in the show, and
there's no hole in the show.
He may or may not be able to call in. So apparently, the scheduled show date was not put on his schedule.
And
so,
how many times were they sent notice?
Oh, they were sent, I would say, at this point, 3 emails confirming that he would be on.
Okay, so what did we learn from this?
Yes, what did we learn from this?
Well, I don't know if it's a question of the topics that we were going to talk about.
No, I don't think that's it. I think what happens is that the county executive gets probably 500 or 600 emails a day.
Perhaps.
And Catherine Chiaffi probably gets 200 emails a day.
Perhaps.
And the best way what I want you to take away from this is that you have to Facebook friend George. And if you want to get his attention, write to him at 10 o'clock at night under Facebook Messenger, and he'll get back to you right away. He almost always does. And we have to look up and find out who his scheduler is, or who his executive assistant is. Someone puts together his schedule. Obviously, Catherine Chiaffi has some sort of input, but it sounds to me like that the ball being dropped was probably for multiple reasons and not anybody dissing us. John theorized, and it's a plausible idea that that George would not like to talk about the guy in Larchmont who's part of the, what's the name of that group?
It's a group called, well, there were three.
The Rabble Rousers.
Three topics that we're going to be
We're not talking
discussed.
about the other two because those are not controversial.
But the other topic is controversial because George has been prolific in posting in a great Yonkers forum on Facebook that a lot of people should check out. It's called Yonkers Voice Central, and there was some questions about the homeless population in Yonkers, which is burgeoning. And there was, I don't know if it has been confirmed or not, but the main shelter called the sharing community allegedly is supposed to close, and it's going to be, and the facilities are going to be moved to another area in Yonkers. And again, this was neither denied nor confirmed, but George, to his credit, did respond to that, and there were some questions from the homeless people were posing to George. Also, we were going to talk about the budget proposal in Westchester, which here we go again, folks. They're going to have property tax increases, and the third leg of the conversation was going to be about a questionable resident in a Tony town in Westchester named Gavin named Gavin McGinnis, who is the founder of a controversial group called the Proud Boys. Proud Boys was deemed by the FBI
a terrorist group.
Well, the FBI did not call them terrorists. The FBI called them extremists. And there is
that's what they told you. I had a different conversation.
Well, if the FBI, yeah, but you have to get your adjectives straight, because it's a big difference.
That's not an adjective. That doesn't matter.
Whatever, the noun, the adjective, but there's a big difference between an extremist and a terrorist.
What's the difference?
Because an extremist voices one political agenda, and a terrorist actually, I believe, does something else. A terrorist
creates action that is,
and so do the Proud Boys. They get into physical altercations with people who don't agree with their point of view. I think that if these were people coming across the southern border, our federal government would refer to them as terrorists. Well, so I think nomenclature-wise, that the Proud Boys are Americans, apparently, and so we don't like to use the word terrorist.
McGinnis is not an American.
In the past with the bombers in Oklahoma City from years ago.
But that was But there have been many other instances. What happened in Charlottesville was a terrorist act.
Well, the whole issue is that, I mean, here's a guy. He's a property owner. He pays his taxes. He has not been convicted technically of a crime. And a few days ago, he stepped down as the founder of the Proud Boys.
Because it got found out that he has a house in Larchmont worth $2 million. That's why he stepped down. He was outed for being a wealthy man, not someone living on the edges of society, the way the Proud Boys make themselves sound. Like these are street toughs. This guy lives in a house that probably was owned by a Rockefeller or a Vanderbilt, or people who knew them, the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts back in the day. Larchmont now is more egalitarian. I mean, you don't have to be a WASP to live in Larchmont anymore, but for a very long time you did. And John knows from having covered yachting that there's a yacht club in Larchmont called the Larchmont Yacht Club.
Yes,
what a surprise!
I know it well.
Well over 100 years. You could not be a member of a different religion than they were, because there were no Jews ever allowed there.
Or Catholics.
Well, I think, but that changed.
Yeah, but it took a while. It took a while.
By the time you and I were covering this, we were covering the yacht club. They had allowed Catholics in, but by the time I was covering them,
they still didn't allow Jews.
No Jews. No. Matter of fact, I got confronted by somebody who asked me if I was a good Jew, and I asked what that meant, and he said someone who doesn't get offended by anti-Semitic statements, and I said, no, I'm a very, very bad Jew. And I went to the Commodore.
Could be a bad Jew, because you should be a bad Jew if that's the definition of a bad Jew.
And I went to the Commodore of the club, and I said that I was going to go in the kitchen and find a knife, and I was going to turn him into chum.
Then you'd become a terrorist.
Well, but you know something.
But I did say it, and the guy did apologize to me.
But to their credit, the Larchmont Yacht Club today is not the Larchmont Yacht Club of yesteryear. It has changed tremendously. There's some good people there. I have been a guest there of Kevin Ryan, who is or was a member and has a fantastic blues band. He's been on the show. And I got to tell you, I mean, when he told me to come here...
Did he ever sing the Rich Boy Blues to you? My Rolls was in the shop, my Bentley's in the lake, and I just found out that my Picasso was a fake. I got the Rich Boy Blues. You know who wrote that?
Tell us.
I did. Anyway, we're going to be going to break in a few seconds. I really did write that. It's not a joke.
But it was also not your finest hour.
This is Westchester Eye on the radio on WVOX.
Still waiting for George.
WVOX.com. When we come back, maybe I'll sing the entirety of the Rich Boy Blues. I wrote it in the late 1970s when I was in college with my best friend, Alan Orlovitz, who goes by the name Al Orlo.
Who is actually a professional musician.
He's the lead guitarist in Kinky Boots. We'll be right back to talk about non-kinky things after this message.
1460 WVOX.
Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Sharan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back to Westchester Eye on the Radio, our weekly discussion of issues relating to Westchester and the surrounding area. I'm John Sharan, along with Peter Moses and Ardina Seward, and it looks like we may actually have a guest who has called in. And Ardina, your hard work looks like it may have paid off.
My faith has been restored.
Hi, George Latimer. How are you today?
Hi, Peter. John, Ardina. I apologize. We had a little scheduling conflict up here, but I'm happy to be with you for the rest of the hour.
So what was your press conference about today?
Well, we had legislator Nancy Barr from Rybrook had authored a program to honor all of our first responders who are also veterans with a very special veteran pin. It's like a straight bar that says veteran. And so we had an announcement of it. It was an action that was passed by the Board of Legislators, signed into law, and we had the launching off of that today, and we had first responders, police, fire, EMS, from a number of our communities around Westchester County here for that. And it was a nice warm event. It shows that we all hold patriotic appreciation for the role that veterans have played in our society, the sacrifices they've made, and so we were able to recognize quite a few of them. We had about, I'd say, 7 or 8 communities represented with some of their first responders. This program applies all across the country.
And how much media did you have there? Who was there? Do you know?
I couldn't tell you offhand. We had a few outlets. There are many things going on. I see it's raining pretty hard, so you never can tell what happens when it rains hard. People are...
Well, Ardina had a couple of questions she wanted to get into with you, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
It's good to hear your voice, George. You've restored
nice to hear yours, Ardina.
You have restored my faith in politicians following
what you
through.
said off air, though.
Don't listen to
I
Peter.
might lose it before the end of the half hour, so let's see how I answer the questions.
All right, so we have a lot to pack in the final 20 minutes that we have. And I'm going to kind of do this in reverse order. There are three issues that I'd like to talk about. Mm-hmm. One is a questionable resident who lives in a nice town in Larchmont, Gavin McGinnis, who up until a few days ago was the co-founder of an FBI deemed Proud Boys.
He's still a co-founder.
So he is there.
Stepped down.
He's a taxpayer, and the community was, I don't know if they had it yet, but they were going to have a vigil saying that we do not tolerate hate. So I'd like you to weigh in on that. And then we want to talk about the homeless issue in Yonkers. But let's start with Gavin McGinnis first.
Sure. Well, first of all, I always draw a line between speech that is protected under the First Amendment and speech that I like or dislike based on its content. I certainly dislike hate speech and the type of provocative things that I've read about done by the Proud Boys, commitment to having some violent mix-ups at various events and so forth, seems to me to be pretty reprehensible. I must say I haven't seen them in action anywhere. I've just read about them. And they seem to be an organization that, while they put a little veneer over the top of it, is really a group that sort of advances a white supremacist type attitude. Having said that, this is a country founded on free speech. So as long as it's about speech and not violent behavior, then they have a right to say what they want to say. And people who protest have a right to protest if the protest is done in as well a nonviolent fashion and done in a way that doesn't intimidate individuals, then I think folks in the Larchmont community and elsewhere that want to shout out on this organization and behavior is appropriate. But it's a question of balance, because you don't want to stifle free speech, even if you hate it, and at the same time you don't want to glorify people who have a bad attitude and feelings. To be honest with you, I've represented Larchmont for a long time, 25 years. I did not know that he lived where he did until maybe about 2 weeks ago when somebody announced it on Facebook. He didn't have much of a footprint within the Larchmont community, and interestingly, Larchmont is one of those communities that really does have a very active interfaith community between the various houses of worship. They have a strong sense of community outreach, to deal with issues, maybe not in Larchmont proper, but in neighboring communities where there's poverty and need and so forth. So he certainly doesn't reflect what I consider to be the core value in Larchmont. But, if he's bought a home, he resides there, he has a right to live wherever he wants to live, but we certainly don't endorse what he says, and we protest it, but we do it within the bounds of accepting free speech and respecting it.
Gotcha. Okay, now the next issue, John, did you want to ask anything?
No, I'll save mine for later.
Okay, the next question, it's a poor segue. So we're going from a very nice place to live to people who do not have places to live, and we're talking about the homeless population in Yonkers, and Yonkers bears the brunt of having, I believe, the largest homeless population in Westchester County, and it ain't shrinking either. So the sharing community is scheduled to close, or what's the 411 on that?
We have the county is tasked with housing homeless populations, and also tasked with providing shelter for nights of severe winter impact. So those would be drop-in facilities where you don't stay there for any length of time, but on a particular night when it gets to sub-zero weather, you have a place to shelter at night. So we have those two specific responsibilities, our county responsibilities. And what we do around the county is we contract with agencies and with facilities to provide that space. We don't have a county-owned facility. We contract with an existing entity. The sharing community, as an organization, has rented space for a significant period of time from a church, St. John's, in the Getty Square area. The church wants to use the space that the sharing community is in for different purposes, educational purposes and so forth. So our contract to provide this space is scheduled to expire December 31st, and we're going to extend it. We have an agreement to extend the contract to June 30th of next year. In the meantime, we're working with the city of Yonkers. Now, the city, like any community, has power of zoning, and they can permit or not permit any use that they see fit. And, of course, when you're trying to find a place to house homeless people, it becomes very difficult. Many people just don't want them anywhere near them. They don't mind if it's over there, but not near me. So there's an active effort going on right now to find a location, and hopefully the location will be sufficient enough not only to house people in an overnight status, but also provide some day programs. Because the other problem that occurs is when you have folks who don't have a permanent residence, you might be able to house them overnight on cots in a facility, but that's not a workable environment for them to be in all day, and so they tend to go to public facilities, libraries, or other places. And when the weather's nice, they're out in the street. When the weather is not nice, then they're in whatever kind of an indoor shelter they can find. And we have to try to figure out if we can find a space that can house them, and at the same time be able to run some day programs. The problem, however, is also that you need the voluntary agreement of those individuals to participate in those programs. And many times when we talk about people who are homeless, they're not just homeless. They have mental issues, some substance abuse issues. There are other related issues, and maybe some issues of mental health that can lead to, in some cases, to violent behavior. So it's not just simply give them a place to stay and everything will be fine. And then there are folks who are homeless who don't choose to go into the shelters and would rather sleep outside. And there's an argument made that they don't feel safe in those settings. Sometimes that's true, sometimes that's not. And we have the issue not just in Yonkers, but in a number of other communities. There's quite a debate going on up in Peekskill right now over the same situation. So what the county is doing right now is we're continuing to pay for the services that the sharing community provides at St. John's Church in Getty Square. And we are actively looking with the city of Yonkers for alternate space that we can establish as a homeless shelter that will be big enough to have some of the day services that we need. Haven't found the place yet. looking for sites, as I said earlier, difficult to do, find the right size, the right location, but we hope to find it, and we hope to be able to establish it so that when we leave Sharing Community in Getty Square June 30th, that we'll have a place for people to go to July 1st.
So if there's somebody out there who has a facility large enough to house people, or they could operate as a daycare center, how does that work? Did they submit a bid? Did they contact your office?
Well, I would say if we haven't found them already, then we'll just give them the general number here at the county office building, 995-2900. And if there is such a person who has, they have some facility large enough, might be currently a warehouse that can be reconfigured into a residential setting, they should give us a call, and we'll be happy to look at it. We are working, as I said, with the city of Yonkers, because whatever location we pick, whatever physical building we pick, it has to pass muster with the city building code and the city's operations. It's the city police and fire and sanitation that provides basic services as well.
And you're listening to Westchester Eye on the Radio here on WVOX 1460 AM and heard worldwide at WVOX.com. I'm John Charan, along with Ardina Seward and Peter Moses, and our special call-in guest today, Westchester County Executive George Latimer. We'll be back with more conversation with George after we take a brief Fox News break. You can call in if you'd like. Our call-in number is 636-0110.
1460 WVOX.
Let's return now to Westchester Eye on the Radio with Peter Moses, John Charan, and Ardina Seward on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back to Westchester Eye on the Radio, our weekly discussion of issues relating to Westchester and the surrounding area. I'm John Charan, along with Peter Moses and Ardina Seward, and our special call-in guest right now is Westchester County Executive George Latimer. Now, George, you mentioned the press conference earlier today about the special pin for veterans who are also involved with supporting government services out there. You've been a long-time supporter of veterans. I remember seeing you at many events for the VFW, for the American Legion, and Memorial Day, on Veterans Day, at the honor flights that send veterans to Washington, D.C. to see the special monuments that we have down there. Could you talk a little bit about how, since we're still within the last 2 weeks of since Veterans Day, could you talk a little bit about how important it is for the county to recognize its veterans, and perhaps a little bit about how Ron Tochi and the Veteran Services Agency can help our county's veterans?
Well, I'm very happy that Ron Tochi agreed to stay on. He served under the Astorino administration because he is so expert in this area. He's had a lifelong commitment. Veteran himself, remember the 82nd Airborne in his time, and then ever since as a New York State Assemblyman, a very strong advocate for veterans, that he agreed to stay on to head our veterans programs. He and Dan Griffin and his whole team there have really done a very good job of working to identify veterans' needs. Sometimes it's almost like constituent services. A veteran calls up and he has a problem with housing or a DMV problem, and he can get that special assistance that you might not get otherwise because he served his country, and Ron and his team are very knowledgeable about it. Sometimes, as we're looking now, we're looking at all the different things that we charge county government for and determining what type of veteran discounts can we provide as a way to say thank you, as an incentive to engage the veterans community. And then also the recognition things. This was just one example of it, and we did a program earlier this month in light of Veterans Day where we put up a display of some of the traditional American flags, our current American flag, the Betsy Ross flag, the circular flag of the 13 stars in a circle, the 76 flag for the bicentennial, and so forth, as a way to maintain this sort of sense of connection to the country that we all live here and have great patriotic feelings for. I think probably the important thing to keep in mind is we've got a divisive society right now. We've got a lot of arguments going on. Every time politics comes up, and liberals and conservatives and Democrats and Republicans go after each other, and people unfriend each other on Facebook, and they have fights at the Thanksgiving dinner table. But our position in this administration is we're pro-veteran, we're pro-flag, pro-patriotism. We don't believe that patriotism is this party versus that party. We believe that we're all Americans. And America's freedoms include the right to have different points of view. and to discuss them and to debate them. That's what democracy allows for us that you don't get in other countries in this world. So I'm very happy that we're honoring veterans. I'm very happy that we're honoring the flag and doing the things symbolically and substantively that show that whether you're Democrat or Republican, you hold these patriotic feelings and you ought to maintain them.
And I think we have a caller on the line, do we? Yep, caller, speak your piece. And don't make
Hello?
it... Yes, hello, yes. And who are you?
My name is John Rivera.
Yep, okay, John, we're into the final minutes of the show, so you say your...
Make it quick.
Make it quick. You got a few seconds.
Okay, one question. What are you going to do about the people that are staying at the shelter that the Sharon Community Center does not allow them to stay, and they're actually sleeping in the parks?
Okay, all right, George, you heard John?
Homelessness problems.
Homelessness problem?
Right. Well, I mean, I spoke before about exactly what we're trying to do with the sharing community in Yonkers. Now, I've seen John on Facebook, and he's made a number of different comments. In terms of people sleeping in the park, the question is, have they been thrown out of the sharing center, and that's why they're sleeping in the park? Is there not enough capacity? So we need to know more in order to answer that kind of question. If there are people that are sleeping in the park because they've been thrown out of the shelter or the shelter is at maximum capacity, then that's one set of circumstances. If it's some other conflict that's been caused, then that's something different.
I have a different question for you. My question is, because I know you have to deal with this issue quite a bit these days. New York City has a homeless problem unlike any that's been seen in probably at least 20 years. I wonder, and maybe you know the answer to this, maybe you don't, whether or not that is washed onto us, or whether the people who are homeless in Yonkers, Mount Vernon, and as you know, being the county executive, there's a growing homelessness problem in the city of White Plains, in the downtown of White Plains. All these towers are going up, and yet there are people sleeping on the street. Are many of them people who had been in New York City shelters or on the street there and have come up here thinking it'll be easier, or is it mostly local people?
It's hard to say, to know that for sure. There's certainly no restriction with a person moving or leaving one area to go to another. And we have, train lines that go into the downtowns of every one of our areas. So somebody who feels that in Manhattan they're in one kind of an environment, maybe a more dangerous environment, they feel safer being up in a suburban environment. The threat factor in downtown White Plains or downtown New Rochelle isn't as great as it would be in parts of New York City.
That's true.
It's hard to know. We certainly don't have as large a homeless population percentage-wise as other places do, but there's a reason why they're in our urban settings, because that is where people who are poor cluster. The less expensive housing is in our urban core, and people who might live in a certain level of housing, sort of tenement housing, if they can't pay the rent for one reason or another, or hard times hit them, then they tend to stay in that area. You don't see a homeless housing problem in downtown Armonk or Bronxville or some of the upscale communities. So I think the reality is, though, wherever they're from, if they're physically in that location now, we deal with them. We don't say, hey, we have this drop-in shelter. It's 18 degrees out tonight. Do you live in New Rochelle? Show me that your last residence was New Rochelle. We have human compassion, and we say, come in and, stay warm. But then the broader question is, and this is one that you ask anybody who asks you about, what's your policy toward this and that? What are we doing to try to help those people have a better life? Not just house them overnight, but folks who are in that situation, if they need medical help to deal with the mental health issues, then they need to get it. It's not enough to just let them continue to exist in that environment, and they have to be willing to get help. If they're employable, to try to help them find employment.
Absolutely.
Someone who says to me that, I'm young and I can't find a job, there are jobs out there to be had. They're not lucrative paying jobs, but we can work with you to try to help you have that. It's not just enough to say I'm homeless, there's nothing I can do, so I'm going to sleep on the street.
All right, now you have, as we all know, Westchester has budgetary problems, and I know that you have a deficit, and I've been reading that one of your ways of shrinking the deficit would be to sell the parking lot at the county center. How is that going, and is that really a great option for the county of Westchester?
Well, first of all, the plan is to transfer the parking lot, and there's a fee involved in it, from the county budget to the County Local Development Corporation budget, which is a county-owned entity like an enterprise fund would be. So we're not selling it to a private sector entity to do whatever they want with it. If we do, in fact, do the transaction, it would remain as a parking lot. If you look at it, you stand there, it's a parking lot, it has X number of spaces, and that's the same way it would be used in the future. So I think a lot of the debate really is more conceptual than it is actual and pragmatic. The offer to do this is really because we have limited amount of resources. You talk to people, no one wants to pay more taxes of any sort. A percentage or two is too much. You have people, we've been able to deliver a budget at a 2% tax increase, and there are some people say, well, you're raising my taxes 2%, and you haven't had them raised over the last 8 years, and that's freaking you out. And but that's the way people are, have a right to come to their own opinions. We also don't have other revenue streams available to us. Revenue streams meaning sales tax increase, mortgage recording, all the other things that are out there that would generate money. And we need to get a piece of these things that are happening. If New York State legalizes marijuana, if New York State legalizes sports betting, if we have red light cameras, if we have some money transaction from the Uber-Lyft transactions, these are things that the county and the local governments need to have to make the budgets work out. And without them, we're stuck with trying to come up with any strategy we can. I don't love the idea of doing what we're doing with the parking lot if it does come to pass. If we can find another way to finance it, that's fine with me. But I'm not prepared to raise property taxes 6%. I'm not prepared to decimate the workforce, and I'm not prepared to go into the reserve fund. All of those are worse
Understood.
choices.
We're going to have to have it at there, George. Thank you so much. I got to tell you, I think this guy's doing a great job.
Thank you,
County
George.
Executive.
George,
Ardina, who do we have on next week? Who do we have on
I'm
next
going to reach out to Gavin McGinnis.
You're going to reach out to Gavin McGinnis?
So, Gavin, if you
I'll bring my flak jacket. John, you going to bring your flak jacket?
Maybe a helmet.
Well, everybody, I hope you all have a great week and get through tonight, because apparently there's going to be some real big thunder boomers. And I'm supposed to go to Kennedy to pick up friends whose plane is supposed to arrive at midnight.
Forget
Good luck
about
to me.
it.
I'll be home by 4 a.m. Have a great week, everybody. Bye now.